Welcome to the Wealth Under Pressure podcast. Financial success very often has less to do with owning a financial product, earning a high income, or even being frugal. Instead, the path to success comes from having a comprehensive plan that enables you to optimize decisions and avoid mistakes. Join John Smallwood, a certified financial planner, as he identifies key areas of pressure on people's wealth and strategizes to reduce it. It's time to liberate your wealth.
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Under Pressure podcast with John Smallwood of Smallwood Wealth Management. We are doing part 5 of a 5-part series. Basically, John has told us a ton about insurance, the different types, and he's covered those in individual podcasts. Today, John is going to be sharing some concrete examples of how these different insurances can work together in someone's life. So, John, how are you today?
I'm well. You?
Fantastic. It's a wonderful day here in the Midwest.
Good. It's a wonderful day here in the Northeast.
Nice.
Always, regardless of the weather.
That's right. All right. So you have some examples for us. Can you walk us through this, please?
Yeah. So what when you start talking about life insurance, most people, they kind of glaze over. You talk about term, you talk about universal life, you talk about whole life, and that's where people get really in the weeds, okay? And there's a lot of opinions and biases making people's decisions and focusing on the wrong thing. And what we find it's really important is to kind of say, let's put this in your strategy and understand all the variables that are impacting wealth and creation. And a couple of podcasts ago, we did a concept on compound taxation, which I don't think a lot of people really focus on. They always focus on the value of compounding interest, but they don't focus on the compounding of taxation. So what I've done today is I created a scenario that I kind of want you to think through with me. And I want you to understand the primary focus of any financial strategy is to reduce taxes, reduce risk, reduce fees and costs, to increase savings rate without hurting lifestyle, to increase the amount of protection that one has, increase retirement income, and pass more to the family. Those things should be taking place at all times in a financial strategy. Most people are doing the exact opposite. They're increasing risk, they're increasing taxes, they're increasing fees, they're decreasing protection, and they have less income and they pass less to their family. Okay? So in a nutshell, what I'm doing here is I want you to envision that you're 45 years old, you've amassed $400,000 of non-qualified money, and there is nothing else in this strategy, okay? And if you recall, what we did is we said, let's have the $400,000 invested in the S&P 500 from 1993 to 2017.
Hey, John. Let me interrupt you just for a second. For those listening to this podcast, we're doing something a little different with this one. John is actually sharing his screen, so we're going to be recording his screen so he can walk you through this example with a visual. So if you're listening to this podcast on your commute or anywhere while you're working out, be sure to go to his website. I'm sure we'll be able to get a link on there for you to be able to view the video that's going to be part of this podcast. It will not be obviously attached so you see it in your car, but you can definitely see it on your PC or Mac.
Great. Thank you. So the $400,000, and the theory here is that if you take the S&P 500 from 93 through 2017, you've got an average rate of return of about 11.25%. So the $400,000 compounding from 45 to, let's say, 66, just to pick an age, okay, is that money grows to over $4,190,000.
Wow.
And you see this all the time. This is the focus. This is what people are focusing on. And our position is that this is not the full story. The wealth is under pressure. So what we've done here is we've said, let's apply some taxation to this, and let's apply very low tax rates. Let's just say you got a 22% effective income tax rate and a 22% capital gains, which is a combination of, let's say, capital gain and state level taxes. So I've got low taxation. A lot of the people listening to this are going to be in the highest tax bracket, so their tax is going to be higher. What we've done is we've broken this down. When you have this return, some of the return is coming from dividends, interest, short-term gains. Some of it's coming from qualified dividends. For purposes of conversation, we break it down so that a third comes from short-term capital gains, a third comes from long-term capital gains, and the other third of it's unrealized and not being realized as until you sell this portfolio in the future. But what's interesting is this is a closed environment. There's no other income. So in this particular strategy, you'd have to take in the first year, you'd have to take about $7,000 out of the portfolio to pay tax. So at 66, basically the tax has eroded from 4.1 million. Your portfolio is now down to 2.7 just because of the tax erosion.
Yep.
Okay. What we also talk about is I've never seen a curve that looks like this in the real world. This is an exponential curve. That's a flat, smooth, beautiful curve, right? You never see this.
Yeah.
All right. So what we did here is we put in what's called volatility adjusted returns, which is capturing each year's return for the time period at the end of the calendar year. So like here, for example, when you see this big drop, well, that's in essence the down 37% year of 2008. Okay. So as soon as you start to get volatility, and we've said this in previous podcasts, is that money is a commodity and is subject to erosion principles like any other commodity, right? So taxes dropped it. Now market volatility is dropping. We have a whole podcast that you can go back and review to go over that. But what that did is that market volatility took the return and it reduced it from that 11.25 down to about 8%. But what it did is it took the account from 2.7 million down to 1.8 million. So 900,000 has been taken in just in the form of volatility. And this is wrong because it's the annualized numbers. It's the end of the year. If you go to the following year after the '08 crisis in '09, the market was down another 25% into March and then ended the year up 21%. So that volatility is going to play into this even greater. So this is just your annual numbers.
Yep.
And one of the things that we saw recently published, and I don't remember where it is, but let's say the average expense ratio of the portfolio between management fees and mutual fund expenses and trading costs and et cetera, runs 2.5%. Click the button, the fees are coming out from that, and now you're down to $1,068,000. So in your spreadsheet, you thought you were going to have about 4.1 million. Taxes took you down to 2.7 million. The market volatility took you down to 1.8 million, and after the fees, you're now down to $1,070,000. And that's what everybody's we're focusing on is how do you reduce these fees? How do you reduce the structure? And then what everybody's doing, and this is kind of where we get into this, is that this 45-year-old has an income. He needs life insurance. He needs things to protect. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to go out and spend a lot of money on insurance. So let's buy some term insurance. And what I did here is I took a company and said, look, $1 million term life insurance policy for 20 years, and the premium's going to cost $1,605 a year, which includes the waiver of premium concept. So that if we're disabled, they'll pay the premium for you. And in this particular case, the policy we convert to any permanent policy at age 65 in this example, 20 years into the contract. So the visual here is the yellow line is the halo. So you got this $1 million policy on top of the 400,000. So if the person in this particular scenario passed away yesterday, his spouse would have the 1.4 million because there'd be $1 million death benefit and the $400,000 is still in the bank. Now, as we go forward, we know that the premium at the end of the 20 years on this particular contract is going to go through the roof. And what's going to happen is we're going to drop it, right? So what I did here is this is the illustration for the term policy, that it's $1,600 a year for 20 years. And in the 21st year, you get a bill for $23,965.
Wow.
You're going to drop it.
Yeah.
If you're sick, you're not going to drop it. You're going to write the check.
Mm-hmm.
It was convertible here. Now it's not convertible here. And then the premium's 26, 29, 32, 35, and it just keeps going up exponentially.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think is relatively interesting. Okay, so what we do is we do the example here where we say, okay, we drop it, and now taking that same 66 mark, you're now down. You've lost another $50,000 in market value of your portfolio. You're at $1,016,000 versus $1,068,000, and that $1 million security blanket that you had for the last 20 years is gone.
It's just gone. Yep.
And you thought you were going to have $4 million when you ran your initial spreadsheet at 11.25%. But forgetting taxes and forgetting market volatility and erosion, and this is not counting inflation, this is not counting any other pressures. This is this closed system, right? So you were expecting $4 million, and now you've got $1 million, and now you have to go to your spouse and say, "I love you, but I'm dropping the $1 million a term."
Yeah.
So from a joking perspective, I don't mean to joke about this, but what I wanted to do is this conversation is along the way, the money's compounding, so the taxes are growing, the fees are growing, the risk is high, and the risk now is, I have market risk. If this is 100% on the S&P 500, I could be down 50% in any 12-month period. I could be up 50 also, but I have now a risk of loss. And then if I die the next day after dropping the term insurance, not only did I lose all the premiums, now my family's lost that $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So my risk is coming in from many, many different places. Okay. And I don't want to go into retirement. I just want to say, let's just use this as the measuring stick and say, okay, we're at $1,016,000 and we have no life insurance. So as we talked about last time, we have the option to say we can spend $1,000 a year on the term insurance, or $1,600 a year, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We can spend more money on the universal life. We can spend more money on the index policy, or we can buy a whole life contract. So what I want to do now is I kind of want to jump into the strategy where we say, let's not do the term life. Let's do the universal life policy. Okay. And the universal life, this is that, remember I was talking about current assumption universal life. And what we're talking about in this, and I happen to be using Ohio National as the carrier. We could put all these in also if we want to attach a download, but this is one of the current assumption universal lives that's basically showing a $5,002 a year premium that's guaranteed for 20 years, and the death benefit's guaranteed for 20 years. At the end of the 20 years, there's no cash value, but if the policy happens to be successful, there'll be about $84,000 of cash value and surrender value, and the death benefit will still be here. And if the current assumptions stay true, interest rates don't improve, mortality doesn't get worse, if you remember all those conversations, This policy will stay in force. It'll make it all the way out. Does it make it? No. It's making it out to about age 79. Mm-hmm. So that's one of those conversations where, what I did here is that when we drop this in, the policy at 66 has the cash value of the $84,000. And what we do here is we show net death benefit, all right? Because on my balance sheet, I have my portfolio of $920,000. I have the cash value for $84,000. So I have $1,004,000. And if I die tomorrow, the $84,000 turns into $1 million, but $84,000 was mine. So I really only have a death benefit of $916.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So we're trying to just keep this apples to apples, but comparing it back to here, this decision was, okay, I'm going to give up about $11,000 or $12,000 in value for the goal of having money stay for a longer period of time. But if we look at the illustration, it may or may not make it, right? Because we know by 79 there's no cash value left, and when the cash value goes, you lose your policy. Mm-hmm. In a current assumption, you also. So this, in my mind, is actually taking us in the reverse mode, right? Because while it's permanent, it's really not permanent.
Got it. Yep. No, I understand.
Now, the company that I was just running these to keep them consistent doesn't have a guaranteed option, but if you're going to pay a guaranteed option, you're going to pay a substantially higher premium, and you're not going to have any increases of cash values. Mm-hmm. But we'll do that. That's something we can talk about at a future time, or if you have a question, you can call me about it. Okay. But what we started to do here is to look at this, and then from a efficiency standpoint, is what we're trying to do is to deploy the capital in the most efficient manner that we possibly can. So what I did here is we said, let's deploy the indexed universal life contract. I must have grabbed the term. Hang on a second. That's the term. Mm-hmm. That's this. I hit the wrong button. So I got the indexed universal life. And this thing here, what we're saying is, all right, client goes out, they buy $1 million policy. They're going to pay $17,000 a year for the indexed universal life contract. But now they have the potential to make a return. So this should make a decent return over time for that client. And what you're basically doing with that $400,000 that's sitting in the portfolio, it's producing dividends and interest. And what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to take, in the current assumption, I'm going to take 5,000 of those and apply it there. In this one, I'm saying take $17,000 off my portfolio from the short-term, long-term unrealized gains and apply it over to the life insurance policy, okay? Mm-hmm. And hopefully compound the wealth over there. And what we find here is that actually gets us up to $1,180,000, okay? And the cash value is up to $614,000, and the portfolio is at $565,000, but the death benefit's still at $1 million at that point in time.
Okay.
But I've got more money. I've paid less fees because I don't have as much money compounding in the portfolio. There's not as much taxation over the course of that time frame. If you look at the portfolio tax this year, it's $16,000, where in the universal life, the portfolio tax just for that year was $27,000, and with the term insurance, the portfolio tax was $30,000. So we've, in the term, by term invested difference, the portfolio tax would have been about $30,000. With the universal life, we're paying about, just to go over this again, $27,000. And with this, we're paying about $16,000 in that year. But what's interesting is I ran this indexed universal life with a 6.32% compounding return every single year, which I believe was the highest number that I could do. But when you look at it, it's not using the guarantees, and it's using alternative scale. Hang on, I got everything in alternative scale, current interest rate. So this was the assumption of using 6.32 in the S&P 500. So every year it's getting credited with this. That is highly improbable. Okay. Yeah. It's going to get a bunch of years with zero and a bunch of years with less. But what's interesting is if you look at the age 65, there's that $512,000 of cash value. If we run the alternative, which is 3% on the indexes, at 65, you're at $350,000. So just 3% collapse in the interest rate is that you're down to $350,000 of cash. And in the indexed universal life, on the guaranteed basis, you're down to $128,000. And within 5 years, the policy is lapsing on a guaranteed basis. So in my mind, while it's a decent option and it could turn out really well, it puts a lot of risk on the portfolio. Because now, is the policy going to make that every year? Is my cost of mortality going to go up? There's a lot of things that are potentially moving. And I'm not saying it's a bad policy. I'm just saying, let's look at the math, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables.
There's a lot of variables. But so the key here is what we're trying to do is buy term invested, the difference gets you to $1,016,000. Buy invest and buy universal life gets you to $1,004,000, and you have some permanent insurance for a few years. And when you're 80, closer to mortality, the policy's gone. Buy the index policy, higher chance of return, but higher probability that you may not get to this number of this larger number, right? So we're not sure where we're going. So the third option, which is what we discussed, was utilizing the whole life insurance. The whole life insurance is, from a premium perspective, is the highest premium. Again, this is a $20,000 a year example where I'm saying pay the premium to 65, okay? And what we're doing is we're taking the $20,000 a year from the dividends and the capital gains, and we're repositioning it into the life insurance. And over that same time frame at 66, we're at $1,020,000 of value, so a little less than the index did on the 6.32% every single year, but a lot more than the 3% illustration.
Yep.
And we still have this death benefit. And what's interesting is if you look at a couple of different things, is that if you look at the value, so we've got this $1.8 million combined between the cash value and the death benefit. That death benefit's permanent. It will be here. It will be here for the entire time frame. If you look at this illustration, just for an example, if you look at the guarantees, so if you recall what we talked about on the whole life, 20 years in, the cash value is guaranteed to be $334, which is higher than anything else. Under the projection, it's at $534, and the death benefit's grown from $985,000 up to $1.3 million. Mm-hmm. And so we've got a lot stronger guarantees. Once a dividend is paid and it gets reinvested back into the contract, if that's what your dividend option here is, which I have here is called paid up additions, that's creating a higher guaranteed cash value, but you can't say that until the dividend's been paid. But the idea here is that when you look at the portfolio tax for that year's $13,000, the fees being paid are $10 on the portfolio. I've got about 60% of this portfolio is now been allocated to life insurance. $400,000 is here in the brokerage account. So from a risk perspective, if the market were to drop 50%, the life insurance is going up. So I have a lot less risk, right? Mm-hmm. So I have $10,000 in fees, and I have $22,000 or what's my tax? My tax is $13,000. Compare that to the index. The index would have a little more fees because there's more money in the portfolio. The tax is more. The universal life, the fees are higher. The taxes are higher, $27,000. I have less money. And by term invest the difference, I lost my life insurance, and I'm paying substantially greater fees at $23,000, and I'm paying $30,000 in tax. So when you look at your income potential and you look at your risk potential and you look at what's happening, is the whole life insurance strategy, in essence, produces the most value for the client. Mm-hmm. If I become disabled, the $20,000 a year is going to be paid for, freeing up to $400,000. If I get sued, in most states, the cash values are protected from creditors. I have access to my money at low-cost loans. I could take the dividends out tax-free, right? All those benefits that we were talking about. And the real question is, how do you use the death benefit in retirement? We touched upon some of that, but that's one of those things that I think we should be talking about in a future podcast, is how do you use the life insurance death benefit in retirement to increase your retirement income?
Definitely.
And that's something that is very powerful, but the key is to get to the same spot with less risk, less taxes, less fees, and now move into the next phase, which is how do I enjoy more of my money and still pass more to my family? And that's what we're trying to do here. And again, there's a combination of what's right for the individual. This $400,000, $250,000 earner, let's just say, who's 45, needs a lot more insurance than $1 million. So you have to go through your personal situation. You have to sit down and say, where's my income? What are my taxes? What am I saving? What's my debt structure like? What's my lifestyle like? What's my family obligations that I have to do? Helping parents out, helping siblings out. Am I getting income from my family? How are my assets built? What are the liabilities like? What are my future obligations from college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And then what you're trying to do is to put enough life insurance in place, combination of term and permanent, which could be universal life, index, UL, or whole life, or the other two variations, right, which would be the variable, which we didn't discuss, is what's the right mix for the individual? Because when I get to retirement, I do want a certain amount of life insurance in force here to help out with estate taxes, and all these policies now have an accelerated benefit rider on it.
You got policies in place, though, in case that coughing turns worse, right? Got a few things in place.
I am maxed out. I happen to be maxed out at the moment. I have the disabilities maxed out, the business overheads maxed out, the life insurance is maxed out.
Yep.
I am, as they say, I'm not the shoemaker's kid here. I've drank the Kool-Aid.
That's right. No, it's good.
Okay. And this is so quick, right? But this concept is that, and this is why I want to do it this way, is when you add all the variables in, you take the taxes, you take the transaction fees, you take the fees and costs, you take the market volatility, you start to get a bigger picture of what's really going on. Mm-hmm. And you realize that portfolio diversification through taking different products and putting them together, from life insurance to portfolios to cash to annuities to real estate to mutual funds, exchange traded funds, whatever you want to call it, right? All of those have a role in your financial plan and should be organized in a way to reduce taxes, reduce risk, reduce fees, etc. for you, specifically designed for the individual. Not this is my product and let me shove it down your throat.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's what frustrates me. Okay, is that we see all these wonderful things out there, and it's just do this and your life will be saved. Well, that's not true.
Yep. Everybody's got the opinion, a different opinion, and the different sources don't know you personally. That's why it's so important to get together with an advisor, a trusted advisor that can walk you through and tailor something just to you. And that's what I know, John, you do that, and your team does that. To all of you listening to the audience, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. A couple things. Number one, check out the website. Take a look at the slides and things that John was going through. And though it was rapid fire, there's a ton of great information there. It should spark questions for you. Please reach out to John and his team. Also, reach out to John and his team with ideas for the podcast, things that you want to learn about now that you've heard a couple from John, you know what he's talking about, you know what his team can do. Give them some suggestions for what podcasts you like to learn about, what things you'd like to learn in the world of finances and insurance. Incredible resource, the entire team at Smallwood Wealth Management. So thank you again for listening to today. John, any closing thoughts?
Just come to the website, smallwoodassociates.com. Take the opportunity to do the pressure identifier conversation, the wealth curve conversation. It's free, 30 minutes. Will help you assess what your plan is and what's going on. And at the end of the call, you'll know if it's right for you or not.
Absolutely.
No obligation, no pressure, all just a conversation.
Yep. Invest 30 minutes in yourself and make that call. Get to the website and do what John's telling you to do, because just 30 minutes can really, really open your eyes to all the possibilities. So thank you again for joining us today. If you have not subscribed to John's podcast, please do so by clicking the link below. It also will make this much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And again, I guarantee that you've got friends and family that need to hear this message, need to have that personalized touch in their life with their finances and their insurance. For everyone today at Smallwood Wealth Management, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. We'll see you next time.
Smallwood Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor. The opinions expressed by Smallwood Wealth Management and guests on this show are their own. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Information presented is for educational purposes only. Moreover, no listener should assume that any discussions or information presented serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from Smallwood Wealth Management or from any other investment professional, and is not intended as an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Smallwood Wealth Management is not a law firm or accounting firm, and no portion of this presentation should be interpreted as legal, accounting, or tax advice. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation.